Yeah, and thank you to everyone for organising this and for the opportunity to share the work that we've been doing. I'll just share my slides now. Hopefully you can all see that. Great. So as Satvia said, my research is really focused on understanding why psoriasis occurs, and in particular, why some people get psoriasis and others don't. And also why some people get more severe disease symptoms than others do. And really, it's a puzzle that's got two main types of pieces. So there's the genetic component, which is the genes that you inherit from your parents, and then environmental risk, which are things like stress, infection, smoking, or as we'll discuss today, body weight. And so one way that I think it's helpful to think about this is to really think about kind of disease risk in terms of this cup. And these risk factors that we've just described, both the genetic risk and the environmental risk, fill up an individual's cup. And when that cup reaches the line, that's when an individual will develop the symptoms of psoriasis. And if the cup fills up beyond that line, that will mean that the symptoms will get more severe. And so if we then kind of visualize what the kind of genetic risk and environmental risk look like in terms of filling that cup up, here on the image, the genetic risk are different genetic variants from around the genome that influence the disease risk. And here I've just shown them with black circles. And then the environmental risk factors are kind of filling the same cup. And they're the stress, infection, smoking, weight, and also age. And as we increase with age, that comes with an increased risk of developing psoriasis. But some of those environmental risk factors are modifiable. So if we look at these two cups here with essentially the same risk, so the same number of genetic risk factors and the same number of environmental risk factors, if we look at the risk on the left with a smoker, they've got a big smoking bubble, a risk bubble associated with smoking. And so if that individual would then stop smoking, the overall level of risk in their cup would drop, and that could lead to their symptoms improving, or potentially, as we see in this particular example, dropping below that threshold and potentially resolving. So that's the good news, that some of these environmental risk factors are modifiable, and so we can change them to change our overall level of disease risk. And as I said, I'm a genetics researcher, and so from the genetics side of things, we kind of see two main paths that lead to psoriasis. There's what we call the strong gene path, and this is where some individual inherit one genetic variant that has a very large impact on disease risk. And as you can see here, I've shown that in the picture with a big genetic risk factor in the cup. And then the other path is where individuals inherit a combination of many weaker risk genes. And in this group, the environmental triggers appear to play a much bigger role. But as we'll see, that's not necessarily the case. And so just over 25 years ago, scientists identified what this strong psoriasis risk gene was. And it's a gene called HLA-CO602, and it encodes a particular protein that's involved in controlling the immune system. And if you have this particular version of that gene, your risk of getting psoriasis is about 10 times higher than someone without. And about between 30 and 50% of people with psoriasis have this particular version of this gene. And if you have this gene, you're more likely to get psoriasis at a younger age. And we now know that you're also likely to respond slightly differently to certain biologic medications. And so this is where it gets interesting. When we looked at thousands of individuals with this strong gene and those without, we found that those with the strong genes were on average leaner and less likely to be overweight. And so that triggered a series of kind of important questions to try to understand this. One of which was, is all weight gain equally detrimental? And the second was, does weight management only matter if you don't have the strong gene? And so we looked at, in thousands of individuals with psoriasis, we looked at 25 different measures of body weight and body fat to try to work out which one mattered most or if they were all equally important. And we'd use standard measures like weight, body mass index, waist circumference, but we also use advanced methods like MRI and DEXA scans to really evaluate where adipose tissue was being stored. And the clear result that we found with this study was that the strongest link with psoriasis risk was with central adiposity. So measures like waist to hip ratio. So if your waist is substantially larger than your hip measurement, or where we were able to quantify the amount of abdominal fat that an individual had through MRI and DEXA scans. These were the strongest effect on psoriasis risk. And it's known that this kind of central storage of what you may have heard referred to as visceral fat, it's not just a way of your body storing energy, it's a metabolically active store of adipose tissue, and it has an inflammatory profile. It excretes molecules which trigger your immune system. And this releases these signals can drive inflammation throughout the body. And so that led us to the next question, which was, does this extra weight that's stored on the waistline actually help cause psoriasis? Or do people with psoriasis just happen to be heavier? And so we used a genetic research method that's called Mendelian randomization. But what it tries to do is to try to disentangle cause and effect. And here the answer to in our study was yes, it's true that this higher central adiposity is a causal risk factor for psoriasis. And then we had a second important question. If you remember, we have the two genetic groups, and in the genetic group that didn't have the strong gene, we'd observed this increase in body weight, but we wanted to see, is this causal effect present whether or not you have the strong gene? And we found that actually there was evidence that whether or not you have the strong gene, this waist-hip ratio or central adiposity store was important in terms of your risk profile and was contributing to your disease severity. So what does this mean? Well, I think this research has a kind of clear and practical message. It doesn't matter which genetic path has led to your psoriasis, whether you've got that strong gene, the HLA-CO602 gene, or not. But because weight is a causal risk factor, managing weight is one of the most powerful things you can do to improve your psoriasis symptoms. And weight management should be a key part of psoriasis management for everyone with psoriasis. And so in terms of the take-home messages, psoriasis is this mix of genetic risk factors and environmental risk factors. And for some, there is this single strong gene that is the main driver. And that heavier weight, particularly weight that's stored as fat around the midriff, is a major risk factor as well as that strong gene effect, and they're independent. And so the good news is that although you can't change your genes, you can influence your weight, and we'll hear more about that in the next talk. And so managing your weight can help reduce that risk of either developing psoriasis, or if you already have symptoms, help reduce the severity of your symptoms. So I'll close there and hand back to Salvia.